Chapter 20. Xia Jinyuan, who always had his own plans for the operation, did not answer immediately. Instead, he quietly looked at the little girl who had a determined and cold expression in her eyes. Perhaps it was because he had been silent for a long time. She spoke again anxiously. If we go down from here, we'll reach Xianxia Creek. If we run in that direction, we'll reach the main road. Captain Xia, if you trust me, please follow me this way. Yi Qian, who had chased after them in a hurry, had a small cut on her face from the leaves of a shrub. Her forehead was red and swollen, and her little face was dripping with blood. However, her gaze was firm and unwavering, like a sapling that had taken root at the edge of a cliff. Even the wind and rain could not break her proud and unyielding character. Xia Jinyuan was silent for only a few seconds. His thin lips curved slightly. Under the helmet, although his extremely handsome face was cold, it gave Yi Qian warmth. Because he said, "Okay." Concise and crisp, without any pause. "I can guarantee it." Yi Qian pursed her lips and nodded gently. She said in a clear and childish voice, "None of you are as familiar with this place as I am. You won't go wrong if you follow me." Xia Jinyuan, who was smiling, clasped his slender fingers together, then slowly and coldly waved them out, indicating for Yi Qian to go first. "I can also guarantee that with us around, you'll return home unscathed." Sometimes, one chose to believe because of a look, an action, or a sentence from the other party. Xia Jinyuan believed in Yi Qian because he could see calmness and confidence hidden beneath the calmness in her eyes. She was an interesting little girl. She was wild and knew when to advance and when to retreat. Believing in her was actually not a difficult thing to do. In order to make himself believe in her, her face was tense and her eyes were filled with defiance. It was like the sun shining down from the sky, bright and dazzling. She really wanted to help them. Xia Jinyuan smiled faintly and nodded. He said in a low voice, "We'll be in front, and you'll be at the back. Don't act rashly under any circumstances." "Okay, I won't be a burden to you." Yi Qian knew that he heaved a sigh of relief. The wind blew gently again, and the smell in the wind grew fainter. The soldier in charge of the map glanced at Yi Qian and whispered to Xia Jinyuan, "Captain Xia, she's right. This is the fastest way to escape to the main road. You three this way." Xia Jinyuan's slender fingers gently stroked across the map. With a serious and cold expression, he was like a king who was guiding the country and guarding his great mountains and rivers. "The three of you, stay here and guard the rear." Xia Jinyuan raised his head and looked coldly in the direction of Yi Qian. "Little girl, since you know he has a gun, you'd better hide it well." Yi Qian nodded. "Okay." Although the soldiers didn't quite understand Xia Jinyuan's decision to bring a little girl with them, they didn't immediately ask. They carried their guns and quickly chased after them under Yi Qian's lead. There was no mistake in the direction she chased in. A soldier who used to be a scout secretly looked at Yi Qian, who was walking in front of him, in surprise. This little girl didn't observe her surroundings, didn't look at the scene, and didn't analyze the possibilities. How did she do it? Compared to the scout's surprise, Xia Jinyuan was only shocked for a short while before calmly accepting it. Chapter 21. Yi Qian, 14 years old, second year of middle school, no parents after the age of 4. Lu Bing recognized Yi Qian at first glance, so when Xia Jinyuan asked, he succinctly and clearly explained the situation. Everyone in the village said that she's a pitiful little girl. Children without parents to take care of them were usually more sensible and knew how to survive. Xia Jinyuan looked at the figure that was even more agile than a swallow flying through the forest, and his gaze slightly narrowed. She had a tragic background, but he couldn't see any haze in her. He could only see the strength in her eyes. He only glanced at her once, but it was hard for Yi Qian to ignore his gaze, especially when he had such a strong aura. When she turned back to look at him, she only saw him calmly retracting his gaze, leaving her with an extremely elegant side profile. He instructed the soldiers, "Send the coordinates back to the troops and seal off the exit to prevent reinforcements." Once the target was locked, it was time to close the net. Yi Qian kept her promise and stopped after a certain distance. "It should be in front." We can still hear the sounds. She knew that too? They didn't notice. Xia Jinyuan couldn't help but squint. She raised her hand and gestured to them to move forward. The group of people searched in the direction she pointed. It was indeed in front. The rustling of the leaves was obviously different from the sound of the wind. She wondered if they could tell the difference. Yi Qian pursed her lips in thought. Xia Jinyuan, who was the first to come down, glanced around the rocky slope and found the traces left behind by the three suspects. The large patch of thorns that had been cut open was the strongest evidence left behind by the suspects. How did she know the exact direction the suspects had gone? How did she know that the suspects had stopped here? Yi Qian came down after her. Before she could steady herself, she felt a questioning gaze on her. She looked up and met the gaze of the person who was looking at her. What a sharp girl. Xia Jinyuan suppressed the growing doubts in his heart and reminded Yi Qian again, "Hide well and wait for us to come back. I'll send someone to send you back to the village later." Who asked him to send someone? As soon as they left, she immediately turned back. She only helped them because in her previous life, when she was at her lowest point, a soldier wearing the same military uniform bought a ticket for her. This was a favor that he would never forget, no matter what. Brother Kuan and the other two were captured while they were resting. As Yi Qian was leaving, he vaguely heard the sound of a gunshot behind him. Finally, everything returned to silence. Yi Qian did not go back the way he came. Instead, he went to the spring and washed his face. He washed off the dirt that he had smeared on his face before heading to Zhang Bin's house in the neighboring village. By the time Yi Qian returned home, it was already past 4 in the afternoon. As soon as he reached the main road, he saw Sun Dongqing and Ying standing by the roadside with a suitcase in their hands. Seeing her come over, the mother and daughter both rolled their eyes coldly at her and ignored her. When they ignored him, Yi Qian was happy to relax. "Mom, have you locked up the house? You won't be coming back for a while. If you don't lock up properly, you might attract thieves." Yi Ying's worried voice came from behind him. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, and it sounded like she was really worried about attracting thieves. Sun Dongqing snorted coldly and continued her daughter's words with a fake smile. "If she dares to come in, I'll beat her up. Beat her until she doesn't dare to do it again." He turned around, thinking that Yi Jian would stop. Who knew? She had already walked far away. Sun Dongqing bit her cheek and spat in disdain. Her narrowed eyes flashed with malice. Chapter 22. On the mountain, Xia Jinyuan ordered the soldiers to stop looking for her through his earpiece. This little girl, he had told her to hide well, but she actually left without saying goodbye. Was it that difficult to say goodbye before leaving? "Captain Xia, should we send someone to the village to ask if she has returned?" Lu Bing, who had just returned, was a little worried. There were wild boars in the mountains. Don't let them hurt her. The order to return to the team came from the headset. Looking at the darkening sky, Xia Jinyuan smiled faintly and said, "No need. A clever fox can survive no matter where it is. Retreat. Retreat, retreat. Attention at ease." Returning to the team in the mountains was not as orderly as returning to the field. After the roll call, Xia Jinyuan led the patrol team in the direction of the army in the gradually darkening sky. The sun had already set in the west. The light of the setting sun passed through the forest and shone on the handsome figure walking at the front. He looked even more tall and straight, like a god descending to the mortal world. His steps were very steady, and every step he took seemed to have a biting coldness that made all living things crawl. This was the 20-year-old Xia Jinyuan meeting the 14-year-old Yi Qian today. To the two of them, this was just an accident. The mountain finally darkened, and the village lit up with dim electric lights. Although the village in the 90s was poor and backward, thanks to the army, it was the first village to have electricity. The night in the warm spring was still a little cold. The villagers put on thicker jackets and went to Aunt Chio's house to watch TV. As the only family in the village with a black and white TV, it was very lively at night. The villagers chatted as they watched the television. After a day of fermenting, Sun Dongqing's actions during the day became a critical meeting at night. Fortunately, she was not there. If she was, she would have jumped up. The owner of the TV, Aunt Qiu, was still indignantly saying in the village, Sun Dongqing is really not a good person. If I didn't happen to see her, she wouldn't even have the clothes that she brought to school on Monday. She would have locked her in the room all day long. That girl, you didn't see it. She jumped out and said that I was meddling in other people's business. I could see that this girl was actually quite powerful. Tell me, with Jian Yiling's taciturn personality, how could she be a match for the mother and daughter? As Yi Qin listened, he closed his eyes and smiled faintly. In this life, change would begin from here. Even though the sky was dark, there was no light in Uncle Jen's house. Other than him, there was someone else in the house. It's good that you've caught them. Move those who should be moved as soon as possible. I'll keep an eye on the village. Uncle Jen, who was sitting in his chair, said slowly in a deep voice, I'm old now, and I want to find a successor who can help me sometimes. Uncle Jen's eyes were like torches in the dimly lit room. I've already taken a liking to him. There's no need to trouble the team. A few barely audible breaths paused for a moment before someone said respectfully, You can make the decision. If you need anything from the team, you can contact us at any time. It's getting late. We won't disturb your rest. Goodbye. The person who spoke stood up. There was a metallic luster on his shoulder that flashed in the darkness. We'll be in the team tomorrow. We'll be waiting for your guidance. There are villagers trapping bamboo rats in the back of the mountain. Stay away. Uncle Jen didn't get up to send them off. Instead, he gave them a few reminders. After the few people in the house left, he stood up quietly. Chapter 23. The village chief, Zhang Difu, was having dinner when he saw Uncle General. His heart sank as he ran out to greet him personally. Uncle, you could have just sent me a letter if you needed anything. Thank you for coming here personally. I want to tell you about Jian Yiling. Uncle Jen walked into the yard with his hands clasped behind his back. At 70 years old, he had carried cannons and walked out from piles of corpses. Even though he was old, he couldn't change the military prestige that was deeply rooted in his bones. The villagers didn't know what military prestige meant, but they were all in awe of Uncle General Zhang Difu. Invited old man Jian into the house and asked his wife to leave first. He sighed and said, Little Jian, I'm afraid you've suffered a lot of grievances that we don't even know about. Uncle, it's my fault. I thought it would be inconvenient for you to take care of a girl, so I thought it would be better for you to take care of her aunt. She's her biological aunt, and she's also her aunt's. Who knew? Uncle Jen raised his hand and said, It has nothing to do with you. It's your fault. This morning, Jian Yiling thought it through and said she wanted to come back. I've said it before. She was young, so I couldn't make the decision. But now, she asked for it herself, so it has to be done. She looks like a smart girl, as smart as her parents. She'll definitely become a talent if she's trained well. I won't go to Yi Jifan's place. You send her to school on Monday and find Yi Jifan. Tell him everything his wife has done. Uncle Jen's last sentence was spoken in an icy tone. Zhang Difu's heart skipped a beat when he heard it, and he was extremely flustered. He quickly agreed. Okay. If Jian Yiling wants to come back, there's no reason to stop her. But uncle, these years you... He didn't finish his sentence, as if he was addicted to talking. I haven't retired yet. I go to the mountains from time to time. Grandpa Jen, who hadn't even had a sip of tea, stood up and tidied his clothes out of habit. He stared at Zhang Difu and said in a deep voice, If Yi Jifan doesn't agree, tell him to come back to me. He sent her back the same way I sent her to his house back then. Zhang Difu felt that his forehead was covered with sweat. He couldn't stand it anymore. Uncle, don't worry. You don't have to worry about this. I'll take care of it. Zhang Difu said anxiously. This was the second time he had seen Uncle Jen lose his temper. The first time was when Yi Qian's mother came home pregnant. The second time was when Yi Qian was kicked out of the house by Sun Dongqing. Zhang Difu wiped the cold sweat off his forehead as he watched Uncle Jen walk out of the house. He didn't even finish his dinner before he called Yi Jifan in town. He couldn't handle his uncle's temper. Yi Jifan, who received the call, didn't know at all that his wife had brought his daughter over. After hearing the news, his anger rose. Brother De Fu, I'll personally apologize to Uncle when I come back tomorrow. However, I'll have to trouble you to help me deal with Jian Yiling's matter. My deputy mayor, please don't make things difficult for me. Can I call you brother? I can't make the decision on this matter. Uncle said that you should send her back in the same way that he sent her to your house back then. Zhang Difu made up his mind not to interfere. Who is Uncle Zhen? Did he dare to? Back then, when the army sent the banner over, although it was done secretly, he was still a village official. He knew a little about it. Chapter 24. Okay, I know this is hard on you. How about this? Let Yi Qian come over and talk to her. Yi Fan's face was livid as he suppressed the anger in his heart. Stupid woman. If she dared to delay his promotion and wealth, he would not forgive her. When she received Yi Fan's call, Yi Qian's heart clenched fiercely. When she left school that year, it was impossible that her uncle, the deputy mayor, did not play a part in it. After a clear, hello, Yi Fan's voice came from the other side of the phone. A few years ago, when she heard her uncle's voice, it was full of official tone. It was unlike now when he still played the family card. Uncle, you told me not to mess around the moment you opened your mouth. Forgive me for needing to defend myself. I was wrongly accused by Auntie and kicked out of the house. This was something that the entire village saw. Me messing around? Uncle, based on your indiscriminate behavior, I don't dare to go back. Sorry, Uncle. Auntie Chio is still waiting for me to go back for dinner. I'm hanging up. Goodbye. That home that did not belong to her, she would definitely not go back. Even if it was just a little bit closer, she would not be willing. That night, Yi Qian stayed at Auntie Chio's house. She slept in the same room as her daughter, who was her classmate, Wenli. She did not immediately go back to her own house. Since Grandpa Zhen had sent her a message, then she would wait for Yi Fan to personally send her home. On Sunday afternoon, Yi Qian and Wenli went back to school together. Although they were in the same class, they did not live in the same girls' dorm, so they separated when they entered the school gate. Yi Qian walked back to her dorm alone with her luggage. Although she had left the middle school campus for more than 10 years, she still remembered where her dorm was and where the school building was. Ying, you're amazing. She got first place again, and your cousin got last place again. Yi Qian had yet to enter the dormitory with his luggage when he heard the sounds of little girls playing inside. This voice. Yi Qian narrowed his eyes slightly. After thinking for a while, he remembered who the owner of the voice was. When she pushed open the dormitory door, Yi Qian was like a pause button, stopping all the laughter in an instant. Everyone looked at her. Io, isn't this Yi Qian? A girl in a red coat glanced at him and laughed. You're the last in 10,000 years. You're famous in school now. They're both surnamed Yi, but why is there such a huge difference? In response to the little girl's provocation, Yi Qian placed his luggage on the upper bunk near the door. He turned around and looked at He Jimin with a half-smile. That's right. We both have the same surname, but why is there such a big difference? Her bright eyes looked at He Jimin as she answered. As for the meaning behind her words, anyone could understand what she meant. There were 2 other people in the dormitory who were also on Yi Ying's side. It couldn't be helped. Students with good grades were usually popular in school. For example, Yi Qian, who was last in 10,000 years, could only be friends with the second, third, or fourth last in 10,000 years. Coincidentally, the second last in 10,000 years was also in the same dormitory. However, he hadn't come to the dormitory yet. Yi Ying, who had a reserved expression and accepted the adoration of her classmates with a smile, heard this. Her palm-sized face turned pale instantly. Her eyes, which had been faintly proud of herself, were now flickering slightly. Chapter 25. But He Jimin didn't know the inside story, so she couldn't tell. Hearing this, she raised her good-looking eyebrows. Her eyes were full of contempt as she chuckled. So you're quite self-aware. Aren't you ashamed? She turned around and smiled at Yi Ying, who didn't look too happy. Ying, go back. She's much more pleasing to the eye than before. Wasn't she much more pleasing to the eye? She even knew how to admit that she was inferior to Yi Ying. Oh, and her hair was tied up too. As she looked, He Jimin's gaze became a little strange. She stared at Yiqian and raised her voice, "Let your hair down quick." When she shouted, the two girls who were laughing with Yi Ying looked over. At first, they didn't feel anything, but gradually, their expressions changed. It was clearly Yiqian in front of them, but it didn't seem like Yiqian. In the past, Yiqian was indeed quite good-looking, but she liked to keep her head down and let her hair down all day long. She was like a wooden person who didn't have any opinions of her own. She obeyed everyone's words, so it was inevitable that people looked down on her. In Yi Ying's words, she was her little pet. If she was told to go east, she would never go west. But now, Yiqian had her hair tied up. Her eyes were clear and calm, and there was even a faint smile on her lips. She stood there gracefully. Even if she didn't smile or speak, she was still bright and beautiful. She was like a blooming flower. Her face was beautiful, and her eyes were like ice, making people unable to look away. This was not the Yiqian they knew. It was as if she was a completely different person. The girls slowly pursed their lips. They didn't like it, they really didn't like it. "Yiqian, make our beds." He Jimin suddenly pointed at her bed and shouted, "Quick! I want to sleep." With her speaking, the other two girls' eyes flickered. They looked at Yiqian as if they were watching a good show. So what if she was pretty? She was still being bullied. Yiqian raised her eyebrows. Her calm eyes contained some coldness. She said calmly, "If you admit that you're disabled, I can be kind and help you." "You?" He Jimin was so angry that her face turned red. Without thinking, she raised her hand and swung it at Yiqian's face. Raising his hand, Yiqian fiercely grabbed He Jimin's wrist. He stared coldly at He Jimin and said word by word, "You still want to bully me like before? He Jimin, you can try." He swung his arm and pushed her forward, pushing He Jimin down without any hesitation as she was caught off guard. Yi Ying and the other two girls, who had wanted to watch a good show, screamed when they saw her push He Jimin down. Yi Ying was the first to stand up. She reprimanded him sternly, "Yiqian, why did you hit him? Beat someone up? What a huge crime. Hit people? Student Yi Ying, if this is called hitting someone, then you're wrong. I was just defending myself." Yiqian laughed coldly. He glanced at Yi Ying, who was the embodiment of justice, and turned around to make his bed. He Jimin, who felt that she had lost face, could not take this lying down. She got up from the ground and threw herself at Yiqian. "Yiqian, you dare hit me, you dare hit me." A delicate girl facing off against Yiqian, who used to work in a security company. The outcome was clear, a shoulder throw, and she fell to the ground again. "I said, don't provoke me." Yiqian clapped his hands and looked at He Jimin, whose face had turned pale from the fall. He looked up and coldly glanced at the other two girls, who were so scared that their shoulders shrank back. "Tan Wei, Xie Sifeng, if you want to play tricks behind my back, I don't mind playing with you." Chapter 26. There had been no news of these girls ever since they graduated from junior high school. Yiqian didn't really want to do anything to them. He just wanted to intimidate them. There was no need for him to do anything. Ying helped He Jimin, who was scared out of her wits, sit up on the bed. She looked at Yiqian with a faint smile in her eyes. "You came at the right time." He just didn't know how his mother was doing. "Yiqian, let's see how long you can be smug for." Ying laughed coldly. Her eyes were not only smug, but also certain. She patted He Jimin, who was crying with her head down, and said softly, "Let's let her be smug for a while. Don't worry, she'll cry soon." Her words revealed a lot of information. She wasn't afraid of Yiqian finding out. Since she had returned to school, Yiqian was already mentally prepared. Similarly, she also had an idea of how to deal with it. Why wasn't Ying afraid? It was because of her parents. The corners of his mouth curled up coldly as he looked at the overly confident Ying with dark eyes. The coldness in the depths of his eyes was faintly mixed with a trace of hostility. He gave Ying a cold smile and said softly, "All right, let's see who will have the last laugh." She was also confident. The difference was that Yiqian's confidence was based on her own confidence. Seducing the teacher? How could such a big thing be just a show between Sun Dongqing and her mother? In the face of Yi Jian's faint smile and calmness that came from within, Yi Ying, who was secretly pleased, suddenly felt her eyelids twitch a few times, and panic gradually rose in her heart. Yi Ying clenched her fists and pursed her lips. Don't be afraid, don't panic. She had mom and dad, but Yi Qian, that damned girl, had nothing. What did she have to fight with her? What right did she have to fight with her? As long as Teacher Ku came forward to testify, she would be safe and sound. That damned girl's reputation would be ruined. She would have to live under her nose in the future. Thinking of this, Yi Ying's withered arrogance burned again. She looked away in disdain, lowered her head, and gently comforted He Jimin. However, Tan Wei and Xie Sifeng didn't dare to stay in the dormitory. They found an excuse that they wanted to go back to the classroom to study and left in a hurry. In the classroom, there were already more than 20 students. More than 10 boys were gathered together, and it was unknown what they were whispering about. Sitting in the middle was a boy with pimples on the tip of his nose. He held a physics book in one hand, lowered his voice, and said mysteriously, "Guess what I found today?" A student writing a love letter to a teacher aroused the interest of this group of youthful boys. They stared at the boy who was deliberately trying to tempt them and said excitedly, "F***CK, do you still need to guess? Of course it's a love letter, a love letter." Quick, let us see the love letter that Yi Ying wrote to the teacher. Her Chinese results are so good, so she must have written a lot of nice words. Come, read it out. We can use it for reference. Amidst the roaring laughter, the boy cleared his throat and read the love letter that Yi Ying wrote to the teacher. All the boys and girls in the classroom knew what it was. Wow, this love letter is so mushy. You are the blue sky, I am the white clouds, you are the mountains, I am a tree. Did Yi Ying write it? Why does it seem like she copied it from Zine magazine? Chapter 27. Tan Wei and Xie Sifeng, who had run into the classroom, were dumbfounded. They stood at the door of the classroom in a daze. They had heard every single word of the love letter. Zhang Bin, what nonsense are you talking about? Xie Sifeng's reaction was a bit faster. She rushed into the classroom and yelled at the boy who was reading the love letter, "Shut up! There's no way Ying would write to the teacher. Don't accuse Yi Ying." The girl was thin-skinned, so she vaguely said the word, love letter. How could there be a mistake? Who doesn't know Yi Ying's handwriting? Zhang Bin jumped down from the desk. He was the tallest boy in the class. Standing in front of the girl who was only 1.5 meters tall, Zhang Bin was already 1.7 meters tall. His height alone was enough to scare people. Why would I accuse her? These words are her handwriting. They can all testify. The boys laughed even louder. Ha, Xie Sifeng, you follow the class leader every day. Don't you know? Ha, you must know. Come, tell us how many love letters the class leader wrote to our teacher. You're talking nonsense. All of you shut up. What do I know? I don't know anything. When Xie Sifeng heard that she was involved, she couldn't help but feel anxious. She still wanted to argue, but Tan Wei grabbed her arm. Don't argue with them. Go back to the dorm and tell Ying. Tan Wei's face was pale. She didn't say anything to defend herself. Clearly, she knew something. The two of them quickly ran back to the dorm, but there was no one there. After asking the dorm next door, they found out that Yi Qian was called away by the teacher. Yi Ying accompanied He Jimin to the town's hospital. In the principal's office, the teacher in charge of class 2-2, Teacher Ku, said righteously, "Principal, this kind of problem student can't stay in school anymore. She's so shameless at such a young age. If she continues to stay in school, she'll lead the whole class astray. Vice Mayor, I know you want her to stay, but I'm sorry. I, Ku, will never accept a girl who would seduce a teacher." The principal, Mr. Ku, Yi Jifan, Sun Dongqing and her husband were all in the office. There was also Yi Jian who couldn't be left out. In the face of her homeroom teacher's reprimand, she had been indifferent since she came in. Her gaze was calm, and her posture was as straight as a pine tree. There was no trace of panic on her face, only an extraordinary calmness. When Sun Dongqing heard Teacher Ku's words, She quickly stood up and reprimanded Yi Qian. Why are you still standing there? Hurry up and apologize to the principal. You're so young, but instead of studying, you're thinking about finding a boyfriend. You're trying to drive me and your uncle to death. She wanted to force Yi Qian to confess to the crime of seducing a teacher. Principal Chen, this niece of mine has been an orphan since she was a child, so she lacks proper discipline. How about this, Teacher Ku? I'll transfer her out of your class, but she'll drop out of school. Principal, please make an exception. After all, she's still young, and our country has a 9-year compulsory education. Although she has made a big mistake, I ask the principal to give me, Yi Jifan, face and let her finish her junior high school here. I promise that I'll educate her well when she gets home. I'll make sure she doesn't cause any trouble for the school during her 3 years in middle school. Chapter 28. Teacher Ku of Grade 2, Class 2, was a 40-year-old female teacher. She was dressed very formally and looked like a model of a teacher. However, she had a son who spent money like water and was studying in the provincial capital. She had always doted on her son and sent almost all her money to him. She only kept a little for herself and her husband for food. No one suspected that she received red packets in private. Yi Qian did not suspect her in her previous life either. Until the middle school exams, she saw Sun Dongqing hand a red packet to Teacher Ku when she visited her home. Later on, she gradually understood why Ying was so arrogant back then. It turned out that she had Teacher Ku's support. Yi Qian, who had been silent all this time, stepped forward and blocked Teacher Ku's path. His dark eyes held a faint smile as he looked at Teacher Ku, who was in a hurry to leave. He said calmly, Teacher Ku, don't be in such a hurry to leave. I'm afraid you can't leave until I've resolved this matter. Teacher Ku could not accept being blocked by a student. She shouted angrily, Yi Qian, don't you dare. I don't dare. I just want to ask you to wait a little longer. Yi Qian smiled and turned to lock the door to the principal's office. After locking the door, it was time for the show to begin. Yi Qian was not in a hurry. His voice was slightly restrained as he said, Principal Chen, I know you're from the military. You've emphasized to us that integrity and justice are essential to a person's character. And I've engraved that in my heart and never dared to forget it. The moment she spoke, Headmaster Chen was shocked. This little girl was very calm. She did not panic in the face of such a serious matter. Indeed, this is the foundation of being a person. I'm very pleased that you've engraved it in your heart. Although Principal Chen's expression was stern, his eyes were full of encouragement as he looked at Yi Qian. Tell me what's going on. A little girl who was so calm that her eyes were calm and her every move was calm and unhurried. She had the charisma to make people trust her. Teacher Ku's expression changed slightly. She pursed her lips and said, Principal, no student will take the initiative to admit their mistakes after making a mistake. Yi Qian, Teacher Ku, even if it's a death sentence, the court has to give him a chance to refute. This is your student, but he is also a student of our town's middle school. Deputy Mayor Yi, I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. Principal Chen interrupted Mr. Ku with a serious expression. He turned to look at Yi Jifan and said in a deep voice, If a student makes a mistake, the school will definitely punish him. But we will never wrong a student, especially when it comes to this kind of thing. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. Yi Qian spoke at the right time. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Yi Jifan secretly pull Sun Dongqing, who was about to stand up to speak. He sneered in his heart, but his mouth spoke slowly and calmly, First of all, I will never admit that I seduced the math teacher. As for confessing to the math teacher on Friday, Teacher Ku, I handed in the test paper with Zhang Bin at 2:45 in the afternoon. I walked to the school building at 2:50 in the afternoon. I went to Chaoyang to find Yi Ying at 2:55 in the afternoon. I fell and fainted at 2:58 in the afternoon. And the math teacher left the school with Zhang Bin at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. In terms of time, Teacher Ku, there's no way I could have gone to find the math teacher. Chapter 29. It was even more impossible in the past. Yi Qian smiled. Her facial features were bright and beautiful. She was a natural beauty. When she smiled, her bright eyes shone like pearls. I can tell you where I am every day. In the first month of school, I can tell you where I am and what I do every day. I can tell you. Oh, she was really good at blowing her own trumpet. Sun Dongqing couldn't hold it in any longer. She sneered and suddenly rushed forward. She said sharply, "Damn girl, you're still so stubborn." She rushed forward and waved her hand to slap Yi Qian's face. This was her habit. When she was unhappy, she forgot to hide it. Principal Chen had a military background. When he saw this, he reacted quickly. He slammed his hand on the desk and shouted, "Stop! You!" Amidst the sound of a chair being dragged, he stopped shouting and stood up to walk out. "Aunt, are you trying to force me to confess under torture?" Yi Qian put her hands on the back of the chair. She was the one who dragged the chair in front of her to block Sun Dongqing's slap. She smiled faintly and said, "How impressive! You dare to hit me in front of the principal?" Principal Chen walked out and waved at Yi Qian, indicating for her to come to his side. He then said to the silent Yifan, "So this is what Deputy Mayor Yi meant by educating her properly. I've learned something new." He didn't stop his wife's actions, so there was an element of tacit agreement. However, he didn't expect that not only did he fail to hit her, but it also made Yi Qian even more unruly. If he couldn't do it the first time, he would have to plan again. Yi Zhifan looked at Yi Qian and smiled apologetically at Principal Chen. "Principal Chen, we've embarrassed ourselves in front of you. My wife is just a little impatient. Dongqing, take a seat first. Let's listen to your niece's explanation." "There's no need to explain. If there's something that can't be explained clearly, it's better to let the witnesses come forward." Yi Qian ignored Yi Zhifan's warning look and smiled faintly. "Next up, we might have to bother Principal Chen." Interesting. Principal Chen had said this to Yi Qian. He had asked him to name a date, and she would be able to tell him what had happened that day. This piqued his interest. It was normal for a person to be able to remember roughly what happened in a week, and remember clearly what happened in 3 days. However, for a person to remember everything that had happened within a month, what he had said, and what he had done, that was incredible. His memory could no longer be described as extraordinary. Teacher Ku, who had been humiliated by his student, sat down and sneered. A student who has never passed and is the last in class dares to boast so shamelessly in front of the principal. I want to see how you're going to deal with this. Classmate Yi Qian, are you sure you want to do this? Headmaster Chen looked at the little girl standing beside him with interest. She had always been calm and composed, and a smile appeared on his stern face. Yi Jian nodded and said with a smile, "Every word I said is true, not a single lie. Principal, please." She even cupped her hands in greeting. Principal Chen immediately laughed out loud. "Interesting. Then I'll draw a date." After laughing, Principal Chen gradually restrained his expression and his gaze became more serious. "Classmate Yi Qian, if this matter really gets out, I'm afraid it won't be good for you. You have to think carefully." Actually, Principal Chen already believed her in his heart. Chapter 30. It also made him believe that the so-called seduction of a teacher did happen. But it was definitely not Yi Qian. Yi Qian first invited a few students over. They were all students that she had met before and unintentionally overheard their conversation. Every student who was called in was confused at first and thought that they had gotten into trouble. Who knew that when Yi Qian asked them and clearly said what they had said at a certain point in time, a few of the students who had secretly spoken ill of the teacher were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. "I know what you all said at that time because I happened to pass by. I don't know anything else," Yi Qian explained with a smile. Immediately, the students whose legs had turned to jelly secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "So that's it? She scared them to death." They thought that she knew that they had spoken ill of the teacher. But it was also scary. There was still some time before the evening self-study session on Sunday afternoon. As the students and teachers who entered and left the principal's office changed again and again, Teacher Ku's face was already as white as paper. If she could still accuse Yi Qian of colluding with the first batch of students who came in, then the next few batches? What else could she say? That day, you didn't answer the questions in math class, so you said something to Yu Jing? Yi Jian recounted what had happened on the 16th of March, the people she had met, and what they had said to each other. Yu Jing comforted you and said, the questions just now were really difficult, so it's normal that you couldn't answer them. She also said, there's a beautiful butterfly hair clip from the school's canteen, and she wants to buy it so that she can wear it on her birthday. Yi Qian's voice was soft and gentle. He repeated the conversation between the two girls on the way to the cafeteria without missing a word. The two girls were stunned and their eyes widened in shock. They were both scared stiff. Oh God. How could she still remember it so clearly? The girl named Yu Jing pointed at Yi Qian, then pointed at herself, then looked at her classmates. She was so shocked that she stuttered, You're too scary. I forgot what I said that day. Oh God. How did you get this brain? This way, I can still remember it. She wasn't the only one. The rest of the boys were already saying, F***CK, F***CK, F***CK. Looking at the little girl who recited everything they said that day without missing a single word, King forgot what I said, but she actually remembered it all. The boy raised his hand and clasped his fist. Classmate, I'm impressed. You can even remember this? F***CK. For 2 whole hours, a total of 16 groups of students came. Principal Chen was surprised at first, but now he left his office chair. Still in shock, he carefully looked at Yi Qian and said to the last group of students standing in front of him, All right, you guys can leave first. The boys almost ran away. Oh my God, the girl inside. What is her background? What the F***CK? He only had 1 head, but why did it feel like he had 10 heads? It was too F***king terrifying. What kind of memory is this? Yi Qian gently sipped his water and smiled at Principal Chen. Do you want to continue? There were a total of 17 groups of students just now. In order to avoid suspicion, I didn't call any of my classmates over. No need, I believe you. Principal Chen was so shocked that he couldn't hold it in anymore. He looked at Yi Qian as if he had found a national treasure. Although he tried to make himself look calm, his eyes had already betrayed his current mood. I actually didn't know that our school had such a powerful person. Yi Qian classmate, have you been doing this on purpose these past few years? Teacher Ku, whose face was ashen, sat there in a daze. His eyes were already dull. Yi Jifan, on the other hand, glared fiercely at Sun Dongqing, who was scared out of her wits. He was a public official after all, so he could still say calmly, It seems that my niece has been wronged. President Chen, I hope. Chapter 31. Yi Ying had no idea what was going on in the principal's office. She was helping He Jimin back to school from the town hospital when the bell rang for the evening self-study session. The classroom of the second-year class was on the 3rd floor. When the two of them appeared at the door, the noisy classroom instantly quieted down. Everyone looked at Yi Ying. A few girls who were not on good terms with Yi Ying had already started to chuckle. Their chuckles caused the quiet classroom to be filled with low buzzing noises once again. Tan Wei had already run over from his seat. He grabbed Yi Ying's hand and pulled her outside. Ying, let's talk outside. Teacher Ku was not here yet. He had to tell her quickly. Ying could not help but frown. She pursed her lips and asked, What happened? Why were they all looking at her with strange expressions? Something happened. Tan Wei looked anxious. He lowered his voice and said, Zhang Bin found that love letter somehow. He was called to the principal's office just now. Hurry up and go take a look. Love letter? Love letter. Ying was only stunned for a second. When she came to her senses, her expression changed drastically. Her watery eyes widened and her whole body trembled uncontrollably. In the principal's office, Sun Dongqing was so angry that her whole body was trembling. If Yi Jifan had not held her back, she would have torn Zhang Bin, who had handed over the love letter, to shreds. Auntie, I'm just telling the truth. Why are you glaring at me? The love letter was written by Yi Ying. It has nothing to do with Yi Qian. How can you accuse me wrongly? Zhang Bin was not afraid of Sun Dongqing's gaze. He had been waiting for this day ever since Yi Qian came over and told him about it. No wonder Yi Qian was so miserable in class. It had something to do with Yi Ying's family. He dared to say it today because he was not afraid of Sun Dongqing scolding him. He spoke with the truth. He did not feel guilty at all. Zhang Bin's words made Sun Dongqing so angry that her liver hurt. She could not scold Zhang Bin, so she glared at Yi Qian and scolded, "How did our family wrong you? How could you do this to your sister and ruin her future? So Aunt knows that this kind of thing will ruin your future if it spreads." Yi Qian laughed mockingly. Ming Yan's facial features were as cold as ice. Her eyes were as dark as the night, and there was not a hint of emotion in them. "I happen to know that this kind of thing will ruin your future. Aunt, if you dare to ruin my future, it's useless even if you're my aunt." Her eyes were too cold, and there was a faint hatred that could not be removed. What? You still want to? Sun Dongqing shouted even louder. Suddenly, she met Yi Qian's eyes. Her heart sank, and she couldn't bring herself to say those harsh words. Seeing this, Principal Chen could vaguely understand what was going on. Even a rabbit would bite when cornered. Yi Qian was clearly retaliating. Seeing Yi Jifan's dark expression, Principal Chen said in a low voice, "Zhang Bin, go back to the classroom first. Ask Yi Ying to come to my office while you're at it." He wanted to see how Yi Ying would explain herself. He hoped that this outstanding student's character was as good as her grades. When Teacher Ke heard this, her legs went weak, and she felt a bitter taste in her mouth. The principal wanted her to stay, and did not give her a chance to leave. Outside the door, Ying took a deep breath and was about to knock when the tightly shut office door opened without warning. Yi Ying, who was still mentally preparing herself, was so frightened that she coughed. When Zhang Bin saw that it was her, he opened the door and strode out. When Sun Dongqing heard her daughter's voice, she rushed out and hugged Ying outside the door. "Ying, you've been wronged. You child." She sounded like she was crying, but she quickly said in a soft voice, "Blame everything on that wretched girl. Don't say that you wrote the love letter. Don't worry, Mom and Dad are here." Chapter 32. Of course, Sun Dongqing knew her daughter well. She could hear the lie in her daughter's tone. Sun Dongqing's expression darkened. She said in a low voice, "Unless you want to drop out of school. Otherwise." Principal Chen didn't know Yi Ying well, but he would first look at a person's eyes, then at the person. He had been secretly observing for a while. He smiled and tapped lightly on the love letter Zhang Bin handed over. He asked slowly, "Yi Ying should have an impression of this love letter, right?" "I have an impression of it." Yi Ying lowered her eyes and clenched her fists. Her voice trembled slightly. "I wrote it on behalf of Yi Qian. Principal, if you want to punish me. I didn't persuade my sister. Don't punish her. If you want to punish someone, punish me." Principal Chen gently closed his eyes. He had to admit that he was quite disappointed in this student with excellent grades. When he spoke again, his tone was rather light. "Oh, then tell me why she asked you to write it? Why didn't she write it herself?" Principal, you don't know. My niece's handwriting is like a chicken. She can't even write properly, so how can she write a good love letter?" Sun Dongqing liked her daughter's calmness. That was how it should be. If her daughter didn't admit it, would the school force her to admit it? Under Principal Chen's gaze, Ying pursed her lips and nodded for a while. She didn't speak, but she had already agreed with her mother's words. Sun Dongqing couldn't wait to jump out and confirm her daughter's words. "Principal, our Ying never lies. She's a very honest child. You can tell just by looking at her grades. She has excellent grades every year." Teacher Ku was already looking up and rubbing her temples. Yi Ying was taking one step at a time. Who knew that an adult wasn't as steady as a child? "You're good at studying. As for your character." Headmaster Chen paused for a moment, and his gaze became extremely sharp. "Yi Jian, you ask him. I want to see who dares to wrong you with me here." This meant that they were completely on Yi Qian's side. Yi Ying, whose heart was thumping, suddenly had the urge to rush out of the door. In the tense atmosphere, she clenched her fists tightly, and her brain was spinning at high speed. Principal Chen had complete faith in Yi Qian, so she definitely couldn't do as her mother wished. Then, she abruptly turned around and looked at Sun Dongqing. Seemingly puzzled, she asked, "Mom, you and Dad didn't come to school just because of a love letter, right? It's true that I wrote the love letter on behalf of Yi Qian, but it's normal for us little girls to write love letters in private and only show it to ourselves. Are you making a fuss over nothing again?" Yi Qian had always known that she was a very scheming woman, but he did not expect the young Ying to ruin her mother's reputation for him. She didn't even recognize her own family. As expected of Yi Yifan's daughter, Sun Dongqing, who could not keep up with her daughter's pace, was dumbfounded. Before she could regain her senses, Yi Yifan slammed the table and stood up. "Sun Dongqing, can you stop making trouble for me and my daughter? Isn't it just a love letter with the thoughts of a little girl? Why did you have to make such a big deal out of it? You made me think that my niece really seduced the teacher." Hearing this, Ying covered her mouth and exclaimed, "Seduced the teacher? What nonsense are you talking about?" Yi Ying, whose face was so shocked that she looked like she was about to faint, turned around and grabbed Yi Qian's hand. She hurriedly explained, "Sis, you know how my mother is. She likes to shout about everything. Just ignore her." Chapter 33. Of course, Yi Qian had never thought of using this incident to bring Ying down. Fortunately, what she wanted was simple. She just wanted to make sure that this incident that would ruin her entire life never happened again. This time, Sun Dongqing vaguely understood. When she was at home, the family listened to her. But when she was outside, if she wasn't listening to her husband, then she would listen to her daughter. She rolled her eyes and said, "What? This. I'm so embarrassed, so embarrassed. I wanted to prevent my niece from going astray, but who knew that I'd misunderstood my own niece. I'm so embarrassed that I can't face anyone, I can't face anyone." Yi Ying heaved a sigh of relief in her heart when Yi Jian understood her so quickly. She held Yi Jian's hand and kept apologizing. Sister, don't be angry. I didn't keep it well. I didn't expect my mother to misunderstand. I apologize to you on her behalf. Can you forgive us? Sister, you're so kind. You'll definitely forgive us, right? The corners of Yi Jian's mouth curled up slightly as he looked at Yi Ying, who was so anxious that tears were flowing out. He withdrew his arm and smiled faintly. He slowly said, "Look at you, you're doing it again. You're always forcing me to forgive you, as if I don't forgive you, I'm an unforgivable evil person. Yi Ying, don't use my kindness as a weapon to hurt me. Didn't you say that I seduced teacher? Do you dare to say that to your mother in front of Principal Chen? Do you dare?" Damned girl, she was forcing her to confirm with her own mouth that she, Yi Qian, had never seduced teacher. How is that possible? How could I say something like that? Yi Ying shook her head. Her tears kept flowing, and her small face was flushed red. She seemed to be really anxious for Yi Qian. That's impossible. How could you seduce teacher? Absolutely not. She then said to Sun Dongqing, "Mom, if you make a fuss over nothing, I'll never forgive you. Sister would never do something like that. Don't talk nonsense." Seeing this scene, Headmaster Chen's face turned gloomy. How heartless of a family to bully an orphan child. "Come Yi Qian, come to my side." Principal Chen waved his hand and took down the fountain pen pinned to his chest. "Write a line for me. I want to know if your handwriting is so bad that you need Yi Ying to write a love letter for you." Yi Ying's face stiffened when her name was called out. Why did she have to ask the wretched girl to write? However, as for writing, she pushed Yi Qian and secretly gloated, "Sis, write well. Don't be afraid. You're innocent, I know it. It's all my mother's nonsense. I'm so angry." "I'm not afraid, but I'm afraid that I'll embarrass you if I write it out." Yi Qian smiled coldly. Seeing the other party's frozen expression, he felt a wave of satisfaction. He took the fountain pen and wrote a line of words on the white paper that was spread out. His movements were as smooth as flowing water. He put down the pen and handed the line of words to Principal Chen. Yiqian smiled and said, "Take a look. Do I still need Ying to write a love letter for me? To be honest, I really don't like her handwriting." Ying, whose expression was stiff, turned pale. She secretly clenched her teeth. Chapter 34. Deputy Mayor Yi, who didn't want to say much due to his status, took the paper and looked at it. He felt that he had lost all face today. "You call this ugly? You call this handwriting from chicken scratch? Are you King blind?" Yi Jifan wanted nothing more than to slap the thin piece of paper in his hand on Sun Dongqing's face. He stood up with a cold expression and said to Principal Chen, "Principal Chen, I still have some work to do here. I'll have to trouble you with school matters." He stuffed the paper in his hand into his wife's hand and said through gritted teeth, King came out with you to make a fool of myself. And I even implicated my daughter." After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Yes. I really made a fool of myself today. Sun Dongqing opened the paper and was completely stunned. She couldn't even speak. At this moment, Ying saw that her mother had taken all the blame. She calmed down a lot, but when she saw that Sun Dongqing seemed to have suffered a huge blow, she started to worry again. "Mom, don't blame yourself. Sister will." When her gaze fell on the paper, Ying's eyes instantly widened. How could it be? How could this be written by Yi Qian? The paper gently floated down from her hand, and she saw a line of elegant words written on the pure white paper. The words were like the person. They looked beautiful and long, but in fact, they were slightly hidden and contained a sense of horizontality. Yi Qian reached out and gently caught the paper that was about to fall. He smiled at Ying, who looked as if she had been electrocuted. "Do I need you to write a love letter for me? Ying, you're really ruining your own image. Stay here and explain to the principal." At that moment, Ying wished that she could faint. It was better than being laughed at by someone she looked down on. Yi Jian, who had returned to the classroom for her evening self-study session, received the attention of the entire class. When she saw these unfamiliar yet familiar faces again, the smile at the corner of Ying Han's mouth did not disappear. Everything would eventually pass. She didn't need to be afraid anymore. She didn't need to worry anymore. She had finally taken the most difficult first step. Sitting in his seat, his deskmate was none other than Zhang Bin. "Thank you, Zhang Bin. Thank you for standing up for her and speaking up for her. In her previous life, she owed him a word of thanks. In this life, she must personally thank him." Yi Qian raised his head. His dark eyes held a clear smile as he said slowly and solemnly, "Thank you very, very much." Hey, Zhang Bin chuckled. His eyes clearly reflected Yi Qian's face, which was like a blooming rose, and still appeared to be a bit shy. "You have changed a lot," he said in amusement. "You look a lot better than before." It was a very sincere and pure compliment. Yi Qian's eyebrows curved into a smile. The water in his eyes was like a gurgling spring under the sun, dazzling and eye-catching. "Thank you." Because of his help, Yi Ying's image was no longer as pure as ice and jade. The matter of her writing a love letter to the teacher would forever be a stain on her academic career. "Don't mention it. I just can't stand her bullying you." "Shoo, the teacher is here." The boy who spoke immediately sat up straight, not daring to lower his head and whisper anymore. Yi Qian lowered his head, flipped open his English book, and quickly immersed himself in his life as a student. The night gradually deepened. The lights in the school were turned off, and there was no sound of people. Occasionally, a few stray cats scurried by, making a somewhat frightening sound. After the meeting that night, Principal Chen, who had reported that the matter with teacher had been settled, didn't go to bed. He was still in the office and didn't leave. His gaze occasionally glanced at the silent landline, and then lowered to look at his watch. Chapter 35. It was the first time that Principal Chen, who absolutely obeyed the army's arrangements and stayed in the town's middle school, was absent-minded because of a student. Student Yi Qian from Class 2 shocked him, but also made him see a dazzling rising star. She didn't hide her ability. She stood at the forefront in a way that would make her classmates remember her. Such an extraordinary classmate, because she lived under someone else's roof, had to suppress her ability and carefully survive in the cracks. However, she still couldn't live in a corner. He really felt sorry for her. Forced into a desperate situation, she finally couldn't endure it anymore. She didn't hide her ability anymore. She appeared in a way that would make all the teachers and students remember her. He had to say that he was really grateful to Deputy Mayor Ye's family for forcing him. Otherwise, a bright pearl would be covered in dust and very likely be silent forever. The quiet phone suddenly rang, interrupting Principal Chen's thoughts. Principal Chen, who picked up the phone, lost the scholarly temperament he had during the day and gained a steel-like coldness. "I'm Chen Dongfeng." A steel-like cold voice faintly came from the phone. "I'll be there in 5 minutes. But Principal Chen hung up the phone, picked up the black coat on the office chair, and turned off the office lights. He, who was at least 1.8 meters tall, blended into the thick darkness. He walked directly to the back of the office building. That was the school's freezer, which was funded and built by the army. Everyone knew that the town's middle school specially built a freezer to store fresh meat, vegetables, and fruits in order to ensure the quality of the students' meals. However, no one knew that under the freezer was an oil depot transfer station. Logistics needed to be guaranteed. The army would never put all its eggs in one basket. Principal Chen had been the principal here for as many years as he had been guarding the freezer. No one knew that this middle school principal, who had a scholarly temperament and faint white hair at his temples, was a world-class sniper before he retired from the army. The soldiers who came here didn't know, but the deputy company commander who accompanied them knew. Not only was there a world-class sniper here, but there was also a 70-year-old first-grade sergeant major who even the chief would salute when he saw him. Jumping down from the front passenger seat, the deputy company commander trotted to Principal Chen, who had been waiting for a long time. He stood at attention and saluted without hesitation. "I'm here to disturb you again. Recently, the oil depot has been tight. The time it will take to replenish the reserve oil depot will be extended. When war breaks out, resources will be tight." Principal Chen briefly mentioned that Rwanda in 1994, Yugoslavia and Bosnia in 1995, these 3 wars affected the international community. In the past few years, the Chinese border has been guarded by a large number of troops to prevent people from taking advantage of the chaos to challenge the prestige of our country. Fujian Town was a town that had to be passed through when transferring weapons between the north and the south. The oil reserves and supplies had to be followed closely and could not be delayed. The oil depot was in the basement. It was pitch black down there, without a trace of light. In order to prevent the electric circuit from misfiring and causing danger, the oil storage depot didn't even have electric lights installed. The soldiers who jumped down to transport the oil used the lights on their helmets and quickly used the indoor loading and unloading truck to transport the oil tanks out one by one. About 20 minutes later, the truck started again and slowly left the school. Chapter 36. Regardless of whether it was in her previous life or now, her sleep was as light as ever. She would wake up at the slightest sound. But the good thing was that once she woke up and confirmed that she was not in danger, she could quickly fall asleep again. However, the refrigerated truck that came tonight was a little strange. It came with a full load of goods, and when it left, it was still full of goods. It was as if it had left without unloading the goods. Yiqian turned over slightly, closed her eyes, and smiled. Not long after, she fell asleep again. Before 5:30 in the morning, Yi Jianjian had already washed up. She put on her school uniform and ran to the playground alone. The playground of the town's middle school was as big as 2 football fields. 14.5 laps around it was almost 12 kilometers. Her experience from her previous life told her that training required perseverance. With enough stamina and a strong body, she could protect herself in times of danger without relying on others. After 14.5 laps, the school bell rang, and there were already students on the field who had started their morning run. When Yi Qian returned to the dorm, he bumped into Xie Sifeng, who was about to wash her face and rinse her mouth. She was probably not fully awake yet. She yawned and said out of habit, "Hey, did you get us some hot water?" Just as she finished speaking, Xie Sifeng realized something and her face froze. Her eyes flashed with obvious fear, and she rushed out of the dorm. "Good morning." Tan Wei pursed his lips and greeted her in a low voice before leaving in a hurry. They used to be all high and mighty, but now they were like mice that had seen a cat. Yi Qian laughed and shook his head. He got some hot water to wipe his sweat, then took his textbooks to the cafeteria for breakfast. "Look, that's the girl. Do you guys know her?" "What about her?" "She's quite pretty, and her skin is good too. She's the one I told you guys about last night. The girl with super good memory. Oh my god, now that I think about it, she's quite scary." After a few girls passed by, they whispered to each other. They were afraid that Yi Qian would hear them, so they lowered their voices to a whisper. "Oh, it's her. She's really pretty. How come I've never heard of her before?" Not only were the girls discussing her, but the boys were also discussing her. During breakfast, Class 2, which had not been alerted yesterday, learned about what had happened in the principal's office. When they returned to the classroom one by one, they saw the upper and lower grades discussing Yi Qian. They had mixed feelings. Good memory? He could remember the events of a month? Could she still remember every word spoken by everyone at that time? Why did it sound so scary? A boy in the class who usually liked to bully Yi Qian walked over with a steamed bun in his mouth. He sat down on Yi Qian's desk and said in disbelief, "Yi Qian, what did we talk about last night?" Yi Qian, who was reviewing Chinese, looked up from his textbook. He tapped his finger on the desk and said calmly, "I don't like this behavior of yours. Please leave." Ying didn't come. "You've become bolder." The boy chuckled and deliberately twisted his body to shake the desk. He said provocatively, "So what if you don't like it? What do you want?" It hurts. Let go, let go." His provocation instantly turned into a plea for mercy. Yi Qian stood up, grabbed the boy's index finger, and pressed it down forcefully. Chapter 37. Yi Qian had seen a lot of retired soldiers in the security company, even retired special forces soldiers. She had seen how they trained hard, how they fought, how they could kill with one move, and how they could gain the initiative in an instant. They were so outstanding that she could even see them on TV. From the age of 21 to 23, that was the happiest time of her life. At the same time, it was also the time when she learned the most. Only now did she realize that the hardships she had gone through in the past were actually blessings bestowed upon her by God. Does it hurt? It shouldn't hurt too much, right? I didn't use too much force. Yi Qian smiled faintly. Her bright eyes rippled like black stones. When I invited you, you didn't want to get off. You wanted me to stand up and invite you. When I stood up to invite you, you said it hurt. Liao Jian, you're really making things difficult for me. Listening to her clear and melodious voice that sounded like the gurgling of a mountain spring, her person, her smile, and her voice made people feel as if they were sitting beside a mountain and listening to the sound of the spring water. Was this really Yi Qian? Was this really Yi Qian? The Yi Qian they knew was overly docile, overly gentle. If you scolded her, she would just listen with a smile. If you scolded her, she would just listen quietly. She was like a puppet without a soul. She only knew how to obey them and had no opinions of her own. At this moment, Liao Jian's cries of pain made the students in the class realize that the Yi Qian they knew had disappeared. Under the bullying of the students, under the pressure of Yi Ying, the docile Yi Qian had disappeared. Michi, you can be gentler, gentler. It won't be good for anyone if you break a bone. The other boys hesitated and spoke up. Looking at Liao Jian's finger that was bent at an odd angle, one or two of them felt pain in their own fingers. Yi Qian smiled as she looked at them. They were all from the depths of her memory. Whenever she saw them again, she would remember their names. They were also the boys who liked to bully her. Including the one in her hand, not bad, there were exactly 5 of them. He's the one in pain when his bones are broken, not me. What's wrong with me? Yi Qian exerted a little more force, and Liao Jian's cries of pain became a few decibels louder. The four boys who were still trying to persuade Liao Jian took a few steps back. Liao Jian was already in so much pain that his screams were endless. It's broken, it's broken. Go. Do you want me to invite you down again? Yi Qian knew how much strength she had used. Even if she tried again, she couldn't really break her classmates' fingers. Do you still dare to bully me in the future? Oh my God, who would dare to do that? He might seem easy to bully, and in fact, he was indeed easy to bully. However, once his temper flared up, it was truly unbearable. No, I swear. *CK. It hurts. Liao Jian, whose fingers felt like they were about to break, apologized profusely. Only when his fingers were about to go numb did he let go. With his fingers freed, Liao Jian swung his hand and looked over with a fierce gaze. *CK. Yi Qian, who met his gaze calmly, narrowed her eyes slightly. Her gaze was even fiercer than his opponent's. This made Liao Jian, who had said, okay, 3 times, feel his heart skip a beat. In the end, he reluctantly returned to his seat. Chapter 38. His father has some connections in town. Be careful. Zhang Bin came in from the back of the classroom and sat in his seat. He reminded him in a low voice, I heard that he has some connections in the city. My dad specifically told me not to provoke him in school. Zhang Bin's father was a police officer in the town's police station, so he had some connections in town. Yi Qian smiled calmly. I was just returning the favor. If he has connections, what can he do to me? That's true. After thinking about it, Zhang Bin quickly put his worries aside and asked with interest, You were so cool just now. Who did you learn grappling techniques from? With a father who was a police officer, Zhang Bin could more or less figure out what was going on. Yi Qian took out the math textbook that he needed to test this morning and placed it on the table. He flipped to the exercise page, lowered his head, and smiled. I didn't learn. I just looked. After looking, she could memorize it. Once she memorized it, she could learn it herself. She answered so casually that Zhang Bin was stunned for a while. He panicked and said, You can learn it just by looking at it. Can't you be a little more reserved? He had suffered another blow. The sound of neat footsteps came from outside the classroom. The two of them immediately adjusted their posture and sat up straighter than all the other students. The first to enter was Teacher Ko, and behind her were 3 soldiers in formal military uniforms. They looked cold and mighty. It was not strange for soldiers to often appear in school. Every year, they would come to the school several times to explain basic precautions to the students. However, the soldiers who came back this time made the students hold their breaths. The girls widened their eyes and stared unblinkingly at the young major who walked to the podium under Teacher Ku's guidance. He was so cool. Yi Qian did not expect to see Xia Jinyuan in his class again. He looked at him and lowered his eyebrows slightly. Sorry, I didn't inform you in advance and took up your morning self-study time. Xia Jinyuan took off his military cap and gently placed it on the podium. The solemn national emblem was facing the 62 students below the podium. I'll take 10 minutes of your time. I hope you can listen quietly while I speak. He took off his military cap, revealing his clear forehead. His elegant and handsome face had already stunned several girls who saw him. His voice contained the majesty of a soldier, and there was a hint of coldness in it. His gaze silently swept from the left side of the classroom to the right. When it passed by Yi Qian, it did not stop at all. It was as if he did not recognize him. His silent gaze made the students instantly return to their elementary school days. Not only did they straighten their backs, but they also put their hands behind their backs. Very good. Xia Jinyuan, who was able to intimidate his classmates with just one look, narrowed his dark eyes slightly and no longer emitted a cold light. He placed his hands on the podium and leaned his handsome body forward slightly. Slowly, he spoke again in a very magnetic tone. Today, we will talk about how to be more vigilant, how to detect people hiding around us, how to find out about the movements of the troops, and how to steal the troops. As he spoke, Yiqian no longer lowered his head. Instead, he listened attentively and silently memorized every word he said. Chapter 39. Some countries have a huge intelligence system. They are not only active in their own country, but also in other countries. I hope that every student will stay vigilant and stay away from spies for the sake of the safety and prosperity of our motherland, as well as for our peace and happiness. Xia Jinyuan, who was standing on the podium, had a faint smile on his face when he spoke, but his eyes were deep and sharp. Even if he smiled slightly, you would never think that he was a gentle man. You would be able to tell at a glance that he was an extremely cold man. At the same time, he was also a very charismatic man. He was elegant and powerful, and his handsome face was elegant. When he smiled, his dark eyes were like the waves of the sea. When he was serious, they were like an ancient sword unsheathed. His movements and stillness were filled with an incomparable noble temperament. No one was more suited to wear a military uniform than him. The golden epaulets were luxurious and majestic, and the dark green military uniform was fitted to his body. His every movement exuded the military aura of a soldier. Perhaps it was because he was now facing a group of students. Yi Jian saw that he had concealed the cold and ruthless aura that had appeared between his eyebrows when he was arresting the criminals that day. He spoke calmly, hiding the cold and ruthless aura of decisiveness to kill. Even if they have killed people, they are still bad people. Looking at him, Yi Qin answered Zhang Bin calmly, "They are soldiers. It is their duty to protect the country. They use guns to protect the country, and the people they kill are those who deserve to die." Captain Xia had an intimidating aura, just like the aura of the retired Special Forces soldier at the security company. Yi Qian absolutely believed Zhang Bin when he said that he had killed people. The two of them conversed in a low voice. Although they did not make any big movements, Xia Jinyuan saw everything. His gaze swept over them slightly and paused on Yi Qian's face for about half a second. His deep eyes darkened slightly. "So this little girl is a student of grade 2 class 2. Although you are only students, you are the main targets of foreign spies." At this point, Xia Jinyuan's smiling eyes paused slightly in a certain direction. He held onto the podium and quickly made a gesture to the two soldiers' left hands. Yi Qian's gaze instantly froze. He followed the direction of his gaze and tried to use his peripheral vision to see who their target was. However, just as she was about to take a look, Xia Jinyuan suddenly called out a name on the stage. "The third last female student in Group 5. Can you answer my question about how many tests you usually use to lure students?" Third from the bottom in Group 5. Wasn't that Yi Qian? The moment she was called out, the 60 or so gazes of the entire class all turned to look at her. They didn't quite understand why she had to be called out when there were so many students in the class. Yi Qian immediately realized that he was trying to prevent himself from looking over to avoid alerting the enemy. Under the gaze of the entire class, she stood up with a faint smile on her face and slowly answered, "Students looking for help, invitations for research, payment by piece." Most of the time, it's in these seemingly reasonable scenarios to open the curtain and lure students into the trap. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.